y'all, welcome back. As y'all can see from the title, I will be reading true stories off of Reddit. If you like this type of content, stay tuned for the rest of the video. Give me a thumbs up, leave anything in the comments, leave a pumpkin because you know that's our thing. Also follow me on my social medias. It will be linked in the description. Let's get into it. It all started when I was little. I was 9 years old. I was a naughty, curious, but very much normal boy. I lived in a big house that had a lot of space. I always spend time playing around and running in there. One day my mother comes home and she tells me that the family is coming to visit. So, you know, I get happy because I love to see my cousins. We will organize the house and decorate for their arrival. So I went to tidy up my room. I arranged my little toys and cleaned it up. I finished. And when I went to go help my mother, we also tidied up the other rooms because the family was going to stay the night. So we had to make space for them. There was one room left. I never went into that room. I didn't step foot in that room and it never attracted my attention. That room was at the end of the hallway, and ever since I was 5 years old, I never went in there. Although sometimes I can admit I got curious. So this day I went in the room and I didn't tell my mom. It was more of a surprise. I went in to tidy up and I wanted her to be proud of me. So I opened the door and when I entered, it felt hot. So hot. That room had no light, only the sun shining through the windows. Every time I took a step in there, it felt like the floor was bending. It's because the floor was made of wood. The walls were all worn out. I can admit I was a little scared, but I cleaned up nevertheless. And when I went to go clean the bathroom, the glass door was very hot on the shower. It was old and dirty, and I could see steam gathering all around it. So I'm minding my business cleaning, and all of a sudden I look up because I see a black figure through the glass of the shower. Huh? I was still gonna continue cleaning until I heard my mother shout my name and tell me to get out of there. Then I went down there, I told her, "Mom, what's up? I'm just cleaning up. We got guests coming." I asked her why I had to leave. I'm trying to help you. Keep in mind, I'm saying all of this on my way down the stairs. I'm waiting for her response. She's not answering me.
Hello, Mama, where you at?
She just told me to promise that I would never go back in there. So I promised her. But my curiosity wouldn't leave me alone. I had to do something to get back in that room. I'll write another part in a few days, since this is not my story. This story was left on a cliffhanger. I didn't know that, and if I would have read ahead, I wouldn't have read the story at all. I'm so sorry to leave y'all on cliffhanger. But I feel like we could pretty much tell what's gonna happen. He's seeing dark shadows and stuff, or she's seeing dark shadows. Yeah. I tried to look for the second part of the story. It's not on here. They said I'll write another part in a few days. It's been 3 months. They ain't coming back. I'm sorry. Quick disclaimer, this is not my story. This is my good friend. For the sake of the story, we'll call her Jess. Her story. Every time I think about it, it sends shivers down my spine. So let's get into it. My friend Jess once drove back home from her parents' house through a rural area in southern Germany. Least to say, it was late at night and a relatively quiet ride, until the road ahead suddenly was blocked by what she described as a large log. She was super annoyed by this. This was literally the only way she could have taken back without driving an extra hour or so. When she got out of the car to further inspect the roadblock, she didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Germany is pretty tame when it comes to wildlife in rural areas, so usually there's no wildlife encounters, apart from a hedgehog or a deer. So she began to move the log out of the way. I don't know how long it took her, but by the time she was finished, another car had stopped not too far behind her. They were waiting for her to move the log so they could continue driving. Oh, they didn't want to get out and help? At least that's what she thought. Okay. As soon as she got back into her car in the driver's seat and continued her drive, she noticed that the car was following her. At first, she assumed that it might have been a coincidence because there was only one singular road with nowhere else to go. So it was only natural for them both to be traveling the same route. But it got weirder as soon as they entered the next town and the car was still following her. She panicked a little bit and called the police. She informed them of the situation and that she was driving home so they can intercept the stranger. She panicked a little bit and called the police. She informed the police about the situation. She told them that she was driving home and she wanted them to intercept the stranger so she could arrive home safely. Since she was relatively close to her parents' house already, she knew it'd take the police probably a few minutes till they got there. So she decided to park a few houses away, not to seem suspicious. She continued to sit in the driver's seat to see if the car was still around, and indeed, the stranger even parked directly behind her. Oh, they bold. At this point, she had her pepper spray ready to go, doors locked from the inside, and she was obviously super anxious. When a man got out of his car and walked up to her window, he was waving at first, gesturing her to come towards him. She was naturally confused by this. So she decided to roll down her window just a tiny bit and ask this guy what was up, because why are you following me? So the man explained that he had been following her up until this point to tell her when he approached her at the roadblock, a stranger had snuck into the trunk of her car and is possibly still there. Now he used the old urban legend. Jess was absolutely bewildered. This terrified her. She couldn't believe the guy outside of her car at first, but he showed her that he had called the police prior to their conversation, so she trusted him enough to get out the car. Soon after the police arrived, they opened the trunk and arrested the guy that had been hiding in there. How did he get up in her trunk? How she didn't hear her trunk close? What? Turns out her initial stalker was telling the truth, and he was really trying to help her out. That's crazy. So he put the roadblock down to sneak in somebody's trunk. What? I don't really have the details on who was in the trunk, but I have been told that he definitely had ill intentions, probably on breaking into her house or whatnot when she arrived. I never drove around with unlocked doors after that. What? When I was maybe around 10 years old, I stayed with my aunt and her family in Maryland. The area was suburban but not densely populated at all. I was playing with my cousin near a really big park that was surrounded by woods and weirdly secluded. I remember we were playing some version of manhunt and I was hiding from him in the woods as best as I could, so I thought. A female jogger happened to be running by on a jogging path maybe 45 minutes before sundown. I remember it starting to get dark and the weather being pretty chilly. Somehow, she caught a glimpse of me, the little bit of me that was somehow visible from her angle, and to this day, I think it must have been super bad luck for the both of us, because the odds of her seeing me were low. She was spooked and she was trembling from her reaction. I assumed this woman must have been a victim of something serious in the past. This was not in any way a Karen situation though. She shouted with the type of desperation you have when you scream during a dream. She said, "I see you! What do you want from me? I know someone is watching me!" Well, hold up now. She started screaming for help. I absolutely panicked and I froze. I totally did not know what to do. It was such a unique and strange circumstance that my brain could barely process it. I finally sprinted away as fast as I could. From time to time, I think about that poor woman and feel so bad for causing her stress. I'll never forget the distress in her voice from screaming. I'm sorry, that's not funny because she really probably thought she was in danger, but that's funny. I'm sorry. Back in 2009, when I was 19, I'm now 34 female, I was dating a girl, 21 female. I was in college and living at home with my mom. My girlfriend and I had been together for about a year at that point. She had invited me to a coworker's party in a nearby town. I wasn't feeling well that night, so I decided to stay home. Now, to get from our town to the coworker's town, you had to drive a long stretch where it was just woods on both sides of you. I think it was late fall around this time, so it was getting dark earlier. She was driving home around 7:30-ish, 8 o'clock, when she called me from that wooded road just to chat along the way. The call suddenly ended. At this point, you might be thinking the call dropped because she was driving through that wooded area. That's what I thought too. She called back almost immediately and I answered the phone, but it wasn't her. It was a deep voice, but it was completely clear. What I mean by clear is it wasn't staticky or anything. To this day, I 100% maintain that it was not a radio interference or anything like that. Anyway, the voice was deep, clear, and sounded urgent yet angry. It was speaking in a language I've never heard before, like German, French, Romanian, Spanish, or something like that. It might be dramatic to say, but the voice didn't sound human. I wish I could somehow record my thoughts so I could post the memory of the voice, because that's just how bad it was. The voice was just really indescribable. I remember sitting there in my bedroom completely frozen, holding the phone to my ear. Eventually, I got up in a panic and I ran to my mom's room. I handed her the phone and frantically said, "Please, please listen to this." As soon as she put the phone to her ear, the phone hung up. Just like before, my girlfriend called back almost immediately. I hesitated to pick it up this time, but when I did, it was actually her. The first thing out her mouth was, "What the was that?" So you heard it too. According to my girlfriend, I'm the one who called her back, and when she picked up, she heard the same damn voice. We're still on good terms to this day. We broke up maybe a year after that incident. But even still, whenever we see each other, we're both like, remember that phone call? Girl, remember that? Whenever I bring it up, people say it was a radio interference. Somehow I might have picked up another call. I'm willing to accept a non-paranormal explanation, but it was definitely not a radio interference. What are your thoughts? Hey, so let me tell y'all this quick story because I'm utterly traumatized. So last night around 1 a.m., I got a call. It was no caller ID. I don't usually pick up those type of calls, but this time I did. It was a voice that sounded exactly like my mother, and it sounded like she was in a panic and needed to talk. She sounds scared beyond belief. I immediately jumped to the worst conclusion, like somebody died or whatnot. Then she proceeds to tell me that she's pregnant. My mother was over 60. That's highly unlikely. So I just sat on the phone listening. She proceeded to say that she was having an affair with somebody much younger. Red flag, my mother would never. But me, I was just going along with it, just to see how far this will go. I can admit at first I was in a panic myself. I mean, it sounded real. It sounded exactly like my mother. I then tried to change the topic and ask her about her yoga class. That's when she hit me with the, yeah, we met at yoga. That's how the affair started. For me, the comment was just weird. She then followed up with, I wish we had used protection, but I just like how it feels without it. Mom, I don't need to know that, mother. I immediately hung up the phone because that's just not how my mother speaks. I called my mom's number and I asked her, Mom, did we just speak? Were we on the phone? She said, no, I'm asleep in bed. So now for me, the question is how, what, when, and why would somebody do this? I mean, the way it sounded just like my mom is astonishing. When I think back, the person didn't call me by my name or anything specific. I'm low-key traumatized. Is this a scam or is it something more? That's a scam call, boo. That ain't nothing creepy. My husband and I have a very large bedroom. One day he was in the bed under the covers and I was all the way across the room from him. It was more so about 15 feet away. We were having a conversation while he laid in bed, and then I started to turn my head towards the bathroom. But I remembered I needed to ask my husband something first, so I turned right back around instantly. That's when I nearly jumped out of my skin. Because in that split second that I had turned away, my husband was now directly behind me, where a second ago he was all the way across the room. We were suddenly nose to nose, and it was as if he levitated out of the bed across the room. I shrieked. I asked him, how did you get out the bed and all the way across the room so quickly? He said, the normal way. But from my perspective, I literally turned part way around and spun right back around instantly. And he had changed positions in a split second. I have no explanation for this. He was very unbothered by the situation, like I was tripping. Was this a paranormal experience? Was this actually my husband? Or did I come in contact with his doppelganger? On this day in question, it was supposed to be just another ordinary day. I was heading over to my mother-in-law's apartment to pick up my husband and our kids. She lived on the third floor of an old apartment building. To get to her door, she had an old winding staircase that went all the way up to her door. No elevator, no other way out. Keep that in mind. I rang the doorbell from the hallway, expecting my husband to come down. He was still upstairs with our kids, so I headed up to meet him. It was only one staircase between us, just one. But somehow, our paths never crossed. When I got to the third floor, the door was already open. My toddler was standing right there. She was standing with my mother-in-law. We then exchanged pleasantries, and I waited for my husband to come down. But to my surprise, my mother-in-law said he already had left, and he had taken our other toddler with him. At that point, I froze. He left? What do you mean he left? He couldn't have left without me passing him. There's only one staircase. I was trying to shake off the weird feeling crawling up my spine. I went back downstairs, and that's when I seen him standing by the car like nothing happened. I couldn't hold back my confusion. I asked him, how did you get down here without passing me? The look on his face when he responded sent chills down my spine. He was just as bewildered as I was. I was upstairs when you rang the doorbell, he said in an unsteady voice. We stared at each other. The realization was sinking in. Somehow we both had used the same staircase at the same time, but we hadn't seen each other. Not once, not even a glimpse. It was almost as if we had become invisible to each other, slipping through the same space, completely unaware of each other's presence. We didn't even know what to do. How could something like this happen? It defied the odds of logic. I've read about strange occurrences like this. I even lurked on forums filled with bizarre stories that were unexplainable. but I never thought something like this would happen to us. Everything happened so fast. I remember my fiance and I were sitting on the couch. I had only just proposed the night before, but she was already planning our guest list and cake arrangements, right? Our baby Thomas was snoozed in his bassinet, and everything seemed normal. But as we discussed venues, she suddenly froze mid-sentence. She had a strange look in her eyes, half confusion, half desperation. She began shaking. When I then asked her what was wrong, her lips struggled to form a sentence, chattering over her teeth. All she could get out was cold. But it was Arizona in July. Nothing seemed to warm her up. By then, she was crouched over, clutching her stomach in agony. She then started to repeat one word again and again. Hungry. Immediately after that, Thomas began crying, and I knew something was very, very wrong. I then ran into my room to get my phone. She needed an ambulance. But from the next room, a sharp cry sounded like twigs was snapping. I then saw my fiance. She was holding Thomas's limp body in her arms, and blood was everywhere. She was eating him. Pause. Bullshit. Okay?
What have you done?
I screamed. She seemed not to even notice or care. But she then howled, "Food! He's food!" I ran for my gun. I didn't know what else to do. That was 15 years ago. This case went on to make national headlines. The Suburban Psycho eats child. Eventually, I threw all their belongings away. I only kept the engagement ring. You gonna give it to the next one? I just couldn't bear to part with the engagement ring. So this incident happened about 6 years ago, right? Myself and 3 other friends went to a concert. It was the biggest venue in Mexico City. One of my friends was a woman. That's important for the story later. So the concert ended and we agreed to meet up at a point outside of the concert. We was all supposed to get a cab and ride back together. There was about 100,000 people at this concert, so of course we got separated at one point. Eventually we met back up at the meetup point. We waited for one of our friends who hadn't made it back for about 15 minutes or so. After that, we started to get worried. So after calling her phone and not getting through, we assumed the sheer amount of people making phone calls at this venue was congesting the phone lines, so it wasn't going through. Therefore, they won't be able to call us, or we won't be able to receive their calls properly. After about a good 10 minutes of trying to call her, I got a phone call from her. She sounded extremely gloomy and sad. She said, "Hey Sebastian, I'm all right. I'm already at my place and everything is okay." I immediately got freaked out because how was that possible? It literally wasn't. She lived 2 hours away and not even 1 hour had gone by. How are you at home already? So we all got super freaked out and we tried to call her back. At the same time, we started flagging the cops down because being in Mexico City, we thought she had been kidnapped. 30 seconds after the call, she comes out of the crowd looking as chill as could be. How could you possibly look like that? I began yelling at her. I said, "What the hell is wrong with you? Why would you call me and say that? What's going on?" Etc., etc. The thing is, she looked so surprised, she denies even making a phone call. She informed us she tried to call us, but she couldn't even get signal. Just like we couldn't get signal. We didn't believe her because of course I answered the phone and it was clearly her voice. We all heard her voice on the phone. She didn't believe us, so I pulled out my phone to show her she called my phone. As I'm pulling out my phone, there's no record of her having called me or me receiving the call. To this day, I have no idea what happened because the voice on the phone was definitely hers. And she knew details about me and my name. I'm not sure if what I experienced was a glitch in the matrix, but I only had 2 overpriced beers at this concert. There was no way I hallucinated this because others were there to witness. Let me know your thoughts on this because I cannot explain it. That's crazy. I truly believe there are things in this world that we have no answers for. Since they want to bullshit, I'm gonna read this like bullshit. It's time to leave.
No, they want to cut grass. They want to cut grass right now?
She panicked a little bit and called the police. That's a lot. That's a lot of panic. I don't think the moral to the story should have been don't drive with unlocked doors. I think it's sit at the roadblock and call the police to have them come move it because I'm not getting up out of my car, especially late at night, to move a roadblock. Hello? Police. Come quick. 911, this is emergency. What? Doing these stories really test my reading skills because I do want to be a reader. I was gonna say a professional reader, but what is that? So I like reading these stories. I would love to read to kids. I want to read to kids.